Good evening, everyone, and thank you for tuning in this evening. My name is Nick Phillips. I'm a reporter with the Arizona Capitol Times, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's debate featuring two Republican candidates to represent Legislative District 27. The Citizens Clean Elections Commission is the sponsor for this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested primary election have been invited to participate in this debate. Candidates that have opted into the Clean Elections Clean Funding Program are required to participate, while traditional candidates are invited and encouraged to attend. When voting in a primary election, voters are choosing between candidates of the same political party, so their preferred nominee may advance to the general election. As the moderator this evening, I'll do my best to ensure candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents. Please note that tonight we do have candidates running for both the Senate and the House. This is the Republican primary debate for District 27, and all 6 Republicans running to represent District 27 are running with a traditional funding model, including the 2 that are here with us tonight. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from the voters. Leading up to the debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state, asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them, and this survey data, along with input from journalists at the Arizona Capitol Times, Arizona Agenda, Green Valley News, and Sahuarita Sun, have been utilized to guide the discussion so it best serves voters. And of course, we want to hear directly from voters, so if you're watching this debate live, you can submit a question at any time by email, by writing to debates@kc-a.com. That's debates@kc-a.com, or by sending a text message to 480-808-1814, or by calling 480-937-1253. And if you're sending a message or making a call, please be prepared to be specific in your question and specify if it's directed for one candidate or for both of the candidates with us here this evening. We screen the questions for clarity to eliminate duplicate speeches or personal attacks. And this debate's scheduled for approximately 1 hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we'll do our best. For the candidates tonight, you'll have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for your responses to voter questions. We encourage an open exchange of dialogue between opponents, so if you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal is to connect candidates and voters tonight so that our electorate may vote informed. On the note of a courteous environment, I apologize to any folks for my voice. I'm recovering from a cold, so I'm going to be a little bit scratchy this evening, but please bear with me. So as I mentioned, we have 2 Republicans with us tonight who are running to represent District 27. One is seeking a position in the state Senate, the other running for state House. We have Jamie Kelly running for state Senate and Brian Morris running for state House. We're going to start off our opening statements in that order with Ms. Kelly first, and then we'll rotate back and forth so that Ms. Kelly isn't always on the hot seat. Mr. Morris, you'll answer the first question first, and then we'll continue rotating. So without further ado, we'll go ahead to those opening statements. So Ms. Kelly, please begin.
Good evening. My name is Jamie Kelly. I'm an Arizona native and a Glendale resident who's called the zip code of 85308 my home for almost all of my life. I'm a mom of 3 and a grandma of 6, and I'm married to an Air Force veteran who retired after 28 and a half years of law enforcement service. I'm a human resources professional with experience in marketing and development, and my main focus over the last 10 years has been in nonprofits, helping them develop their boards, policies, and procedures, and getting them established in the community to serve. I'm honored that I serve on the board of K911 Pause Foundation as their vice president. I'm also a board member for the Arizona Unity Tour Charities, We work with law enforcement, fire service, dispatchers, and their families. And I'm a civilian board member on AZ Post, where I help oversee law enforcement in the state of Arizona to ensure that we keep the good officers in and get rid of the bad. My goal in running for office is this is a state that I believe in, it's my home, and I want to fight to protect it. Thanks for having me tonight.
Okay, thank you. And Mr. Morris, your opening statement, please.
My name is Brian Morris. I'm also an Arizona native. Ironically, when they redistrict, it's where I live. It's where I've lived since the 1970s, where I grew up. I actually attended Sweetwater Elementary and Moon Valley High School. So I'm right down the street. These are my communities. I'm a local business owner. I've been the owner of We Fix Ugly Pools, among other things, for many years, and have spent the last 20 plus years in supporting first responders, law enforcement, kind of on a boots on the ground effort, doing the very grassroots right in the heart of the city. So I'm very familiar with the issues that plague our cities. My goal in running is to kind of get rid of some of the establishment and, bring in some new blood and some new ideas. We cannot continue to attack subjects the way we've been attacking them without having some new ideas and looking at, different solutions for things. And I want to serve my community that I grew up in and where I've been born and raised and been a member of since the time I was very small. I very much love this area, and I hope that you'll vote for me in the future.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Morris. And our first voter submitted question is going to be first to you, Mr. Morris. And this is about a subject that's been in the news a lot lately, the recent Supreme Court decision in Roe versus Wade and what that means for access to abortion in Arizona. There's some debate over what existing Arizona laws say about the legality of abortion procedures. But what I want to ask you both is, what do you believe should be permitted or made illegal in terms of abortion access in this state?
I'm very much a pro-lifer. I mean, life is precious. It's a miracle that, we have that gift from God. And we need to protect that. Overturning Roe versus Wade really helped to undo a lot of what was happening in the media and in the left agenda to push late-term abortions all the way up to almost the time of birth. We have to make a stand somewhere, and we have to stand for the people who can't stand for themselves. And to be honest with you, I don't know of any fetuses that are going to the polls, so I choose to stand for them because they don't have a voice for themselves yet.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Kelly?
Absolutely. So I am 100% pro-life from conception till natural death. Over Roe versus Wade, it sent the issue back to the states where it belongs. In Arizona, I am hopeful that we will protect life from conception. I know there's a lot of controversy and discussion around the current statute versus the state law that has been around since the founding of our state. And I believe that we need to protect life from conception. I also want people to know that this is not about attacking mothers. We need to love the mothers and the child. The issue is with the providers. We need to focus stopping abortion and eliminating this business in Arizona. So I'm 100% pro-life.
Okay, I want to go back to both of you with a follow-up question. We'll go to Mr. Morris first. I hear both of you saying that you want to protect life in this state, but what, if any, circumstances do you believe should be allowed as exceptions, in which case an abortion should be legal? I'm thinking specifically about cases of rape or incest or the health of the mother.
I think what we were dealing with is a very touchy subject, and the health of the mothers is obviously, if the mother is going to be impacted by carrying this fetus, then obviously we have to look at alternatives, whether it be early birth or, in some cases, are there going to be extreme areas where we're going to need to look at termination? The idea is to protect life in its inception all the way through, as Jamie has alluded to, from conception to death. And that's the idea. The issue we have is that there's a number of people. For every one person that's up for adoption, there's 5 people waiting for adoption. So I have a hard time just terminating life just because that life wasn't maybe planned. Life is a gift. Life is a miracle. And we need to look at it as such, and we need to treat it as such. And if we need to assist, like she said, love the mothers through this and help them make those better decisions. We can't just give them where, oh, it happened, we need to be able to terminate this. We need to have those discussions and those hard discussions. And we need to say, look, we're going to be there for you. We're going to help you through this. I don't think just terminating a fetus due to rape or incest is a necessity. I think that we can give other alternatives that we have not given these people up until this point, these mothers. And we really, I love Jamie, I'm sorry, I love the way you said that. We have to love them as much as we love the fetuses and we love the potential children that will be born in this world.
Okay, I want to come back to you on this supporting the mothers in a moment, but want to go to Ms. Kelly briefly. Any instances in which you think abortion should be legal?
No, when we talk about the idea of pregnancy happening from rape or incest, the idea of abortion actually re-traumatizes the victim to an extreme condition that people are not considering, they're not thinking about, versus loving the mother through the process. We also need to address how abortion has become a way to erase the sexual predators and their consequences for their behavior. And we're seeing it time and time again. Rape and incest is only 0.5% of abortions that are happening in America. So we're utilizing victims of sexual assault to market the murders of innocent babies, and that has to stop. When we talk about the health of the mother, when we look at medical necessity for abortion, there is none. If a mother is unable to carry a child to full term, that child will terminate itself. And then there will be necessary medical procedures to remove that child from the mother. But let's give the child a fighting chance. Technology is improving, medical advancements are through all the difficulties of pregnancy have shown that life is possible from conception until natural death.
Okay, and back to you, Mr. Morris. Talk to us more about specifically what kind of support you think should be provided to mothers who find themselves in a situation of perhaps having a child that they weren't planning.
I think the first thing is figuring out and getting a chance to counsel with them and getting them with somebody who can actually, take them through the journey. The problem we have is that it's easy for someone to walk into a clinic, be counseled on abortion, and then walk out. And that's the easy choice. The hard choice is to actually counsel on the choices that you have when you keep that baby. Are you going to give it up for adoption? Are you going to let a family member, you know how many family members would be willing to take these babies? They would never leave the family. I know so many different families where the baby was born to somebody and it became adopted by someone else who's still in the family. So give them those choices that sometimes they don't think about, give that child a chance to live and to grow and to have their own life. So it's taking that mother, counseling her, maybe providing her, having resources set aside, being able to get her through the pregnancy, to help her through the pregnancy into the decision-making process. And believe me, there is a number of resources out there that are underutilized because all we hear about is, let's go to the clinic, let's talk, let's go through a few pamphlets, here's the procedure, when would you like to schedule? And that leads into a whole number of other things, including body part sales and selling of fetuses for science and for profit, which we need to stop. This is going to put a stop to a number of things that are going to happen. And it all starts with understanding the mother's situation and helping her better her decision-making process through the pregnancy.
Yeah, I'm hearing from Mr. Morris some parenting counseling, maybe some lessons to be learned there. Ms. Kelly, anything to add in that respect?
Absolutely. So I'm a huge advocate for Choices Pregnancy Center that's actually here in our district. I've done diaper drives, baby clothes drives. I've helped support them in whatever way possible because they're a resource that helps mothers see that this is a life, there's a heartbeat, there is a beautiful child there. So giving them those resources. And if a mother goes through the program at Choices with their parenting classes, they can actually get the equipment, diapers and clothing that they would need for their child. And it's also for the family. It's not just for the mother and whatever that family looks like for that child. It could be a grandparent, an aunt, a friend who's an aunt. So I absolutely love what Choices has to offer, and I want to support more programs like that in America. I also am a big advocate for adoption. My 3 children are mine through adoption. When their mother walked away, I adopted them. They are my children, and I've been blessed to be able to watch them raise their children. And in those moments when it was a struggle, parenting can and is hard, but let's give those resources and support so that parents can be successful, and let's rebuild the family unit. Not every family is perfect. They never will be, but let's give them the resources that they need. And in regards to the family or kinship care, I'm a huge advocate for that. I was actually raised by my great-grandparents. When my parents were unable to care for me, my grandparents stepped in. And so I believe in that ability that parenting isn't just the mother. Let's rebuild those family units and get them back into society.
Okay, all right. Well, thank you guys for engaging on that subject. I want to move on to talk about the economy, and we'll begin by talking about inflation, which we've also seen a lot in the news lately. And by some measures, Arizona has one of the highest rates of inflation in this country. So my question, and we'll go first to you, Ms. Kelly, on this, is what needs to be done to get inflation under control? And what's the role of the state legislature in accomplishing that?
So my first perspective is we need to elect Republicans that are fiscal conservatives into office, and that starts with me. The other part of that is we need to focus on cutting or eliminating taxes to help our taxpayers and our citizens have less pain, whether that's pain at the pump, pain at the grocery store. There's a lot of opportunity for change there. We need to reduce down regulations. The cost of doing business in Arizona is what drives the prices. We have to work to get people back to work. So whether that's career or technical education, opening up businesses and supporting small businesses to expand and grow, there's a lot that Arizona could do. From a legislator perspective, I am a huge advocate for eliminating taxes wherever we can. I remember back when the $32 fee was added to our registration, and I was so frustrated and upset because let's call it what it is. It was a tax, not a fee. It was a tax. So wherever we can reduce taxes or eliminate them, reduce down regulations, and empower businesses to offer great opportunities to our community, that's where I'm at.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Morris, what do you think? What needs to be done to get this inflation in check, and what can the state legislature do specifically?
Well, there's no magic bullet that's going to get inflation in check. I mean, let's be honest. The inflation starts at the federal level and works its way down. We can curb and we can hedge against it here in the state, but we do have to have fiscal conservatives in the legislature. We had to have people that understand business and that understand how to operate on both sides of the paycheck. For too long, we've had legislators in office that don't understand what it is to run a business. So how can you run one of the biggest budgets in the nation if you don't understand really the consequences of writing a check? And we pass bills that have pork in them or have all these little extras in them that don't need to be there. So we need to really look at ourselves and say, how do we stop the bleeding at a state level, and how do we help the owners here? So as a small business owner, just to give you a little example, gas goes up $1.25 a gallon. That costs me $96,000 a year. That's a business. How does a homeowner deal with that? Prices of inflation, interest rates at 6.65%. The same house that they could buy a month ago now costs them $800 to $1,000 a month more. People cannot afford that. And there is no way that wages will ever keep up with that. And if we continue to push wages, it's going to continue to push inflation. So we have to be very careful in the decisions that we make as legislators, because our decisions have consequences. And how many people are sitting in that legislation right now that believe that their decisions have consequences? I would have to lead that to question, because I see a lot of the stuff that they're passing and I'm not impressed. So we really have to be smart about how we attack it on this level. Is there a silver lining? The answer to that question is yes. Get out the people who don't understand it. Let's put people in there that understand how the business operates, and running a state is a business. This is a massive budget. If I don't run my business well, I don't have a business. But if we don't run the state legislative well, we'll not pass a new budget next year, right? That's not the way it should be. And I never have agreed with that. And we raise debt ceilings and we go take loans and this, that, and the other. That's not the way it should be. This is the money that hardworking Arizonans have put into their legislature, and they need to have people who are representing that money as hard as they worked for it. That's my opinion.
So you both mentioned that you have a fiscally conservative philosophy when it comes to budgeting. The state of Arizona has a multi-billion-dollar surplus at present. What should be done with that money? Should that just be redistributed to our citizens, or is there some better use that the state can put that money to provide services or attack these issues like inflation that are affecting our residents? We'll go to Ms. Kelly.
Sure. So I think that one, if we are overtaxing our citizens to have this surplus, let's address that, which I think that's obvious. The other part of it is when we look at how funding is going out, are we looking at how those organizations are operating? Does Bob continue to get funding from the state because Bob is well known in the state and well known in the legislature or well known to the governor? Or is Bob offering top-notch services to our community? Let's address it and see where we can cut back and get money back to the taxpayers and stop overspending. If we have a surplus in the budget, but we still have debts that we haven't paid off, that's not a surplus in the budget. That's not addressing our fiscal conservative values. That's not ensuring that the state is functioning at the top-notch level that it should be. And government needs to stop acting like government, stop operating like a business. We need to put money back to the taxpayer.
Okay, Mr. Morris, the money needs to go back to the taxpayer. Do you agree?
I agree. I've never looked at a budget surplus as I look at it as a positive thing because every business, and the state's a business, should have a hedge against the downturn. And to be honest with you, in 2006, 2007, 2008, we saw some of the most critical times we've ever seen as a state because we had, when you ramp up and everything's going really well, it's easy to ramp up because you have money coming in. The hardest part is to ramp down. So let's use an example. You have a small business owner who adds employees, adds trucks, adds businesses, adds locations. Economy turns. Now, how does he shed those employees, those trucks, those vehicles, and all the added expenses that you have? Part of the government's responsibility, part of our legislators' responsibilities is to ensure that we have a comfort zone so that we can adjust to rise in tax dollars and a deficiency in tax dollars. That's what the surplus is. It's not something that we go out and go, hey, we have a surplus, let's go spend it. Because for many years, the government's done it. Look at our tax code. Our tax codes in all states, federal, whatever, have taxes on them that we have paid off. And yet we keep the taxes there because now that tax is what? It's a surplus. So what Jamie said is we're overtaxing our citizens is a positive statement. I mean, it's probably the most positive, direct, poignant statement I've ever heard. If we do not overtax our citizens and we allow things to get paid off and we don't carry the debts, we're not going to have as many problems when we have those ebbs and tides of tax dollars in and out. We are very fortunate right now. We are seeing some of the greatest growth in businesses in Arizona in the history of me being alive. I've watched the economies go up and down. This will be the third positive, negative recession type of thing that we're dealing with. And we are finally in a position where we have a lot of businesses moving here that will help against those massive drops that we saw in 2008, 2009. That budget surplus needs to be exactly what it is. It needs to be there to hedge against those ebbs and tides. And that's my opinion. But I agree. We go back to the taxpayers. What can we help them with? Because let's look at inflation. How do we reduce it? We take some of the surplus, we pay off debts, we reduce the tax burden on our residents, and then that reduces some of the stress that they have on paying their bills.
Okay, we have one voter who wrote in with a question about the impact of this inflation on a specific group of folks, our retired, our elderly residents here in the state. And the question they had is, do you think there should be special assistance for retirees who are living on a fixed income and dealing with rising costs for necessities like housing, gas, and groceries? Ms. Kelly, what would you say to someone with that question?
So one of the issues that I've heard for quite a while is the issue related to property tax. So let's say a senior has worked really hard, they've been paying on their house and they've got it paid off, but they're still having this property tax bill that they're having to pay every year. Their house is not owned free and clear, because the minute that they stop paying on those property taxes after a certain period of time, they can go in and take that house from them. That property tax can be the difference of putting food on their table, paying their electric bill, or paying for their prescription drugs. So we need to address these overburdened taxes and help where we can. The other part that I think about often is my husband's a veteran. We spend a lot of time at the VA. I've spent a lot of time talking to veterans who are on a fixed income, whether it's a combination of Social Security payment from the VA for their disabilities and service, and they're still struggling to survive. How can we fix this across the board? One, reduce down property tax, reduce down income. And I'm not always a fan of offering assistance across the board. What I'm a fan of is let's identify the cause. So if it's because there's a limited resource available to these seniors, who my grandmother was one, my grandmother received $863 a month on Social Security. That's how she lived. She didn't have additional retirement. She received a little bit of money from my grandfather's retirement. I could not imagine her living in today's world with a house payment, with medical bills on $863 a month. So I feel for these seniors that are going through this. Let's help them where we can. Let's reduce down taxes and get money back into their pocket.
What do you think, Mr. Morris?
Well, I'm actually dealing with this. My dad's a retired school teacher, just almost 80 years old. And as inflation has risen, he's obviously been impacted heavily because they don't get an increase. They don't get raises. They don't get, the opportunity to go out there. And at 80 years old, I'm not going to see my dad go out and find a new job. The reality is that it's funny. Jamie said this, I kind of laugh, but we never own anything. When we pay it off, you could pay, all but one payment on your house, you lose it. You could pay the house off and not pay your property taxes and lose it. And I don't think that's really fair because somebody puts a lot of time into getting their life to a certain point, and then they get crippled by this massive economic inflation. I mean, 30% cost over the last 6 to 8 months has just been absolutely ridiculous. How does a guy like my dad, or how do the elderly that are on these fixed incomes adjust to that and still have any kind of quality of life? We do have to look at where can we have, without having to take money out of the budget and provide additional taxes and services and create additional departments that burden the government. How do we adjust to that and help them survive? And I think a case-by-case basis, really having a solid understanding of where the need's going to be the hardest or the most needed, being able to address for that. So I'm the fortunate thing is that Jamie and I have a very similar view when it comes to how the state's run, because we're both, even though we don't talk, we have very fiscally conservative ideas and understanding how the government is. So I appreciate the things that she has to say. So yes. Okay.
So I want to move on to something that our current state legislature has decided they want to put a lot of spending into, and that's Arizona's southern border and border security. So the budget passed last month by our legislature had about $1/3 billion set aside for construction of a border fence. So I want to ask you both, and we'll start with Mr. Morris. Do you think that Arizona should build additional border wall or fencing on its own? And if so, how would you deal with the fact that it's not the state of Arizona, but the federal government and tribal nations who control the majority of the land along Arizona's southern border?
Well, let's just call a spade a spade. The federal government has failed us. We have a massive immigration problem, and those immigrants that come here illegally, they burden our system. They burden the system, they burden the healthcare system, they burden our human services that we have, that takes away from Arizona residents. So by passing this bill, they're sending a message, hey, we're not going to be held captive by the federal government's inept ability to protect our borders. I think that we need to spend as much as we need to spend to provide border patrol, enough security, whether it be electronic or actual physical fences, to make sure there's enough staff on the ground and that we can house and handle all of the immigrants that are coming across here. We need to be able to take these in, turn them back to where they came from, so that we're not getting burdened on the level here, which is going to also lead to child trafficking, drugs, and additional crimes. And I'll tell you, the violent crimes, we can reduce that just by reducing some of these illegal immigrants from coming here. We have a responsibility as a state. And if we can go to the tribal nations, which we're working on as legislators are working on, to come up with compacts to be able to access the land, these are problems that affect the tribal lands. These are problems that affect other lands and federal lands. And if they won't let us build a fence there, then we can look at it from, do we have drones? Do we have helicopters? Do we have enough ability to monitor these areas without building a physical border? So I don't think we're spending enough. To be honest with you, this is a great start, but it's going to take a lot more to really get this under control.
Okay. Ms. Kelly, what do you think? Physical border, should Arizona do it on its own? And if so, how?
Absolutely. I believe that border security is a top issue. I've spent time down in Cochise County. I've been to the border. I've witnessed the lack of structure and fencing. I've witnessed the supplies sitting there on the side of the road. And I've witnessed all the tags where they've had to fix the fence. I also understand and respect the tribal lands and their sacred land that they have. And I want to be respectful of them. I also want to address the issues that we have of the cartels influencing those decisions with our tribal communities. We need to get rid of the cartels doing business in the state of Arizona. We need to stop the human and drug trafficking. And I believe that, yes, the wall is a great start, but there needs to be more. We need to have the electronic surveillance that is alerting our sheriffs of activity. For example, there was the woman that basically hung to death on the wall. If there would have been electronic monitoring on the wall, we could have identified that there was a crisis and got support out to her and medical assistance. We also need to stop incentivizing illegal immigration. I'm all for people coming to America through the right channels because we want to ensure that people who come here are not criminals, they're not rapists, murderers, or they're not wanted in their own country. And the issue that we're seeing at the southern border with over 164 countries represented in the last fiscal year in Arizona, this isn't just migrant families coming from Mexico. This is military-aged men coming from all over the world. Why? What are you doing here? We're not addressing that. We're not addressing the safety and security of the ranchers who have called the border areas their home for centuries. This is a very dangerous place that we have, and we have to do something. I support building the wall, putting in electronic surveillance, putting in more camera systems, and getting more deputies out there. We know that Border Patrol is not going to be funding to put more Border Patrol agents on the wall. So we need to equip our sheriff's departments to get them out there. The Cochise County Sheriff's Ranchers Division is doing a phenomenal job, but they're exhausted. They're working so many hours, and it's putting them at risk by working that many hours. So we need to get more support for them. So I fully support building the wall with respect of our tribal nations, but I think we can come to an agreement and we can work together. Number one thing, we got to get the cartels out. You okay, Nick?
I apologize.
Okay.
We'll go back to Mr. Morris. My voice is really gone. Ms. Kelly touched on this, but can we talk about what do you believe are the root causes that are causing migrants to come to the United States through Arizona? And do you think addressing those causes needs to be a part of the solution to some of the issues that are happening on our border?
Well, let's be honest, we're one of the nations of opportunity that in the entire world. We offer a better way of life over any of the places that these people are migrating from. Can I fix their countries? No, I need to fix this state. And that's what it comes down to. So the cause of it is there's a myriad of causes. There's people that are coming here for illegal reasons. There's people that are coming here for profiteering. There's people that are coming here for a way of life. And I can tell you that there is a pathway to citizenship. We need to work on that pathway to citizenship as a federal level, but on a state level, I have to protect my neighbors. I have to protect the people that are down the street from me. So I can't address what's going on in another country if I can't address what's going on in my own state. And that's to be honest with you.
Okay. And Ms. Kelly, what do you think are some of these root causes, and what, if anything, needs to be done to address them?
So if you are coming to America to build a life that you are becoming a good citizen, a productive member of society. Absolutely. Let's put America first. With the military age male that we see coming across the border, we know that they're bringing drugs, they're smuggling humans, and this is causing a lot of danger and harm. Also, the cartels are working very hard to recruit young adults and minor children to go and traffic humans and drugs across the border. They're picking them up along the highway, bringing them up through Maricopa County because we're a gateway to the rest of the country. We've seen this. Cochise County has arrested young children that are driving vehicles that are not even of legal age to be driving. My number one response as a mom is, where's your mother? And I asked this question, like, where are the parents? What is going on here? And most of the time the response is they come from a family where they've been ingrained with the cartels. And that's not okay. So we need to save our children. We need to save our family. We need to save our state. And we need to stop incentivizing the illegal immigration. Cut the benefits. You don't come here and get a bank account full of cash from Arizona. It doesn't work that way. We need to put America first and Arizonans first.
Okay. We had another voter who wrote in with an environmental question related to the border. They want to know, do you have a plan to protect any endangered species that move back and forth between the United States and Mexico? Mr. Morris, you first, please.
So I've had a chance to visit the wall, and the fence that's up now that was being built under Trump allows almost any like smaller animals to migrate fairly easily between one side of the fence and the other. Obviously, if you're looking at large animals, we're going to have to, if it's going to be a large animal, it's going to have to need the size of a human to get through. We're probably going to have to look at alternatives to that, but that's where you're going to look at corridors where you have heavier electronic surveillance. We are underutilizing all of this technology that we have available to us. We have the most advanced military in the world. Some of that electronic surveillance material and some of the abilities that we have to do for heat sensors, for movement, and for types of things that people are carrying, we can actually do right now. And it would be very less expensive, less invasive. So we have to have corridors that do allow those migration channels to remain open. But it's going to be a multi-pronged approach to securing the border. Putting up a wall is not 100%. Having electronic is not 100%. Having enough officers is not 100%. But if you can whittle away at each of the issues that you're having by utilizing different parts of this to be able to maintain that, you can come up with solutions that'll make it where everybody can get on board with it. And at the end of the day, what we should be on board with is securing the border. We should be on board with securing this state. We should be on board with stopping child trafficking, labor trafficking, drug trafficking, because that's going to secure our streets. And I don't know how anybody could put anything else first other than that. So let's look at all the solutions. Let's take all of the assets that we have available to us, and let's figure out how to utilize them in a manner that gives us the most secure border possible while having the least amount of impact on migration channels.
Okay. I'd like to move on to talk about education. So, Mr. Morris, for you first, I understand there are some teachers in your family. What kind of support do you think teachers need in the classroom? And how can state lawmakers assist them in getting what they need?
You know, I've got to tell you that education has changed a lot since my parents were school teachers. My mom and dad were both high school teachers in the Glen Union High School District. My stepmom was the president of Phoenix Union High School for a number of years. So I've taken this to task with them to try to understand, you know, what would be the solution. Here's the issue. Our schools have changed in the last 30 years. What they experienced back 30 years ago and what we're experiencing now are two different things. Again, we have to look at how do we protect the child. The students don't benefit when we just continue to throw money at the schools. I am a product of a public school system. I grew up in it, and I feel like I had a very valuable education. I don't feel like the education that's happening in our public schools is even the same as what I got, you know, a million years ago. So we have to look at how do we protect the student and how do we give the student the opportunity to get the best education possible? And that's going to be school choice. That's going to be where we have the funding stays with the student so that we can find special needs students can get the best possible care, so that schools have to step up their game and better utilize their money. Everything comes down to how do you operate your business? And the public school system, I'm sorry to say it, folks, is a business. They are given a budget. They are giving an expense report. They are giving cost. At the end of the day, you have amount of money that you've received and amount of money that you spend. And just continuing to throw money at them, when we give raises to teachers, on paper, it looks really good. The teachers end up with a 50-cent a raise. The administrators end up with a whole lot of lofty things going on. Our school boards, our school districts are too top heavy. We have too many school districts that have only 9, 7, 8, 9 schools in them. And then we have all of this administration, and we have all of these pensions, and we have all of these other people, and we have all these expense accounts. Let's start combining this. Let's start running our schools like a business so that we can give the teachers and hire teachers. I hate to say this, but I saw a billboard the other day down on the freeway in Dallas. They're trying to hire our teachers here, starting at $60,000 to $80,000 up to $120,000. You know why we can't pay our teachers that? Because we have school boards that are too heavy. We have school districts that are too top heavy. You cannot run a lean business and a profitable business, and education, for lack of a better word, is a profit, because every 1 cent tax increase that we put on a bond initiative or a tax is 1 cent less that I have per dollar. And those little 1 cents start to add up. The one thing I hate more than anything is everybody's like, oh, it's only a penny. It's only a penny. Well, how many only a pennies is it going to be before it's 13, 14, and 15% of my pennies? Realistically. So let's look at what it's going to take to make these school districts more fiscally responsible, more responsible to the children and then to the teachers, so that we can pay our teachers and we can lure better teachers back into the districts. It is sad we're a deficiency right now in educators, because we are losing educators to private schools. We're losing them to out-of-state schools. Why is that? Because we're at the bottom. We have major problems in education. So we need to protect the students and allow these students right now, while we try to fix this, have the best opportunities to succeed.
So you think that teacher pay does need to be increased, but you view that money as coming from other existing sources of educational funding?
We need to look at the funding we already have in place and make sure we're spending it correctly. And if that means teacher pay, then that means teacher pay. But we have the money there. Our school budgets are not thin. They are actually pretty good. The way that the school budgets are spent is where the problem is. Again, let's go back to a whole business aspect. If you run your business where the people at the top are the only people making money, but the money's there to pay those people that money, then we have the money to pay teachers better. I don't need a school board member or school board president making $200,000 a year plus to sit on a board 8 months out of the year. That's ridiculous to me. So we have the money to pay our teachers. The teachers need to start demanding more from their unions and more from their districts than they do from the taxpayers. The money's there. We have put that money in play. Let's start getting it to where it belongs so we can have these teachers and fund them in the way they need to be funded, not only in the classroom, but in their paychecks.
Okay, Ms. Kelly, what do you think? Do teachers just need to start demanding more? What can or should the state legislature do to give teachers what they need?
I think we're doing great with funding for our schools. The issue comes down to the school district. How is the school district spending each dollar? Where is that dollar going? Are we spending money on curriculums around SEL and CRT that need to be eliminated? Are we spending ridiculous amounts of money on out-of-state training that is not based in the fundamentals of education, reading, writing, math, and civics? Where are we adding in fluff to what we're doing? Let's bring down the top-down leadership and get it more based in the classroom. I know for our family, we have three grandchildren in Texas that attend public school, and 2 of our 3 grandchildren here actually attend a charter school because of school choice. We saw my grandson get completely left behind by the public school system. I'm so thankful for school choice that allowed for my daughter to move her son into a school that was going to provide him an opportunity to learn and grow. It was nothing against the teacher, because the teachers did their best. It was when COVID happened and the school got shut down, my special needs grandson got completely left behind. This is an issue that many parents are facing. Parents are making the decisions that they don't want their kids being indoctrinated with dangerous curriculums like CRT and SEL. And they're saying, you know, I've been giving, I've been paying, and I'm not seeing it in the classroom. So let's get the money where it belongs, in the classroom and not in the superintendent or all the top level management of a school district. I've said for a long time that I believe we should condense down our school districts. Why do we need, I don't know the number specifically, but why do we need so many districts in our state? What is going on? Is this a school choice issue? Do we need to consolidate it down to one district? You think about it, some cities have elementary and high school. They have a all around school district. What is going on? Is it, I'm not happy, so I'm gonna move everything and go over here and try something different? Let's get back to the fundamentals of education and back to the basics and stop the overinflation.
Okay, so I want to go back to something you brought up here, which is the ESA voucher system. Our legislature voted to expand that again this year. And this is a subject that's come up several times in recent legislatures. Tell me, do you support the universal voucher system? And if so, what do you say to someone who says that Arizona voters through ballot initiatives have rejected universal vouchers several times? We can stick to you, Ms. I was going to go back to Mr. Morris, but you've already been talking about this, so let's stick with you for now.
I fully support backpack style funding for our education system. Parents have the right to choose in what education is going to best fit that child. I know for me, growing up, my family could not afford to send me to a private school, and charter schools in my generation were only for children that were committing criminal activity, the quote unquote bad kids in our school. So for me, being able to start college while I was in high school was a huge benefit. Parents need to be able to make those decisions on what best fits their child's needs. And that's not up to a school teacher to decide. I think about looking back in our public education, my children all grew up in public schools. My children made the decision to not go to traditional four-year university because they knew what they were struggling with and they knew what they could excel in. And I'm very proud of my kids for seeing that the four-year university was not the best path for them. When we look back at the taxpayers saying in a ballot initiative that they do not want backpack style funding, I think that would be a different conversation now, since we've had COVID shutdowns and parents are seeing what's actually happening in the classrooms when we were doing the online learning programs. I fully support the parents' rights and the parents' rights to choose the education for their child.
Okay, Mr. Morris, what do you think about this voucher systems and what message we should take from results at the ballot box?
Well, I think a lot of times people go to the ballot box with an understanding of their own experiences. And as I alluded to in the last question, my experience of going to school and having my parents in the public education system 40 years ago is different than it is today. A lot of times as we can try to empower and educate the voter as much as possible, but they don't understand if they don't have students going through the schools. They don't understand the issues that are happening. They don't have the understanding of how these curriculums have changed and how we're enticing curriculums that should not be in our school. So you're asking a general voter to vote on something that is dealing with today's current events. And these parents are having to deal with today's current events, not the experiences of myself or anybody else from before. When you look at what the ESA does, it allows Jamie called it, it's the backpack, where the backpack funding, where they get to go and choose the education that they want their student to receive. That's empowering the parents to be better parents, to be more involved, and it's empowering the student to get the best education possible. Now, here's the caveat. If you're a district and you're losing students because you do not give your students enough, two things are going to happen. You're going to straighten up and you're going to better your programs. You're going to find programs that are going to be more enticing to the students to keep them from leaving, or you're going to go out of business. That's the very nature of business. That's how it works. You have to find where that starts to level itself out. And if you just continue along, what's the definition of insanity? Continuing to do the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. You know what we've done? We've taken our school system from the top two 35, 40 years ago. Where do we sit now? At the bottom. The very bottom, because we continue to do the same thing. Let's do bond initiatives. Let's do this ballot initiative. Let's do this. Let's do that. Well, people are not in touch with what's going on. If I wasn't involved as much as I am, my kids don't go to school here, so I'm not as involved in that. When I first got into the idea that I was going to run for politics many years ago, I started to look at it. I was all about teacher pay, teacher pay, teacher pay, because that's what I was when I was younger. We picketed the district office. We looked at contracts. We looked at how do the teachers have better contracts, but that's changed. The money is there. The funding's there. The taxpayers have paid out. They've done their job. So let's allow the government now, the legislature to do its job in allowing these parents to take that funding and give their student the best choice of education that they can possibly give them. And those choices are there. They're out there right now.
Okay. All right, I want to move on to our last subject for tonight's debate. Another one that's in the news and stirs up a lot of strong emotions. So this one, if we start going too long, we're going to call it, because we have an hour for this debate. But I want to talk a little bit about election security. And we'll start with you, Mr. Morris. Tell me, do you think Arizona's elections are secure? And please tell me why or why not.
I am a full believer that we need to have one day in person, on paper, voting. We have a number of questionable things that happened that led to the belief and the understanding that there was some fraud that occurred. We had the voter rolls, the dead voter rolls. We had some issues with the electronic balloting, the mail-in ballots. We should not allow mail-in ballots to just be blanketed out to the entire state. So no, we have multitudes of problems. And I don't believe that the current members of our legislature addressed all of those concerns, even the very minimal amount. They barely scraped on it, just enough to appease the voters to say, yeah, we tried, and oh no, or we passed this, but it was empty legislation. We have a fundamental issue here in all states, and our state is the only one I'm concerned about. How do we secure these ones right here? It's one person, one vote, on paper, in person. There should be select reasons like military or health issues where you would get early mail-in voting, or you have the mail-in voting ballots, where that's the only exception. Otherwise, we need to go back and we need to say, hey, we're going back to our roots of how the votes should be handled and how they should take place. And then the questions about voter fraud or voter integrity would be eliminated or reduced down to almost nothing, because we would have a better system in place to have that. I also believe that we need to have the requirement of ID. I don't understand why at 18 I'm required to have an ID to go buy cigarettes, 21 to go buy alcohol, but I'm not required to have an ID to vote, when we know that there are people here illegally, back to our border issue, voting illegally because somebody's promised them something. That's what we need to look at. Why are we not requiring that ID?
Okay, Ms. Kelly, what do you think? Arizona's elections, are they secure, and why or why not?
So one, I have said for years that voting day should be a national holiday and primary or presidential should be a statewide holiday. Everyone should show up to the polls and vote in person. I do understand that our military, sometimes our law enforcement, fire service, there's select groups that may not be able to get that time to go vote, which disappoints me in those positions. I know for me, when I worked in HR full-time, we had to make accommodations, whether it was for staffing adjustments to ensure that all of our staff who wanted to vote could go vote. I do not support automatic voter registration upon the acquiring of your MVD record, such as a driver's license or an ID card. I also don't support the idea that you don't need an ID to vote. I remember when I first started voting, I would go to the same polling place. It was a little church, and it was the same 15 people that would work the poll. They knew me, they knew who I was, and I signed in on a book, and it was a beautiful process. And I was okay with waiting in line for that because I knew the power of my vote. Now, I understand that we may not be able to get it moved to a one-day vote. So let's work on adjusting and modifying what we have going. We need to stop the ballot harvesting. There has been evidence of this. We have seen people prosecuted. They've pled guilty or they've been found guilty. When I first started getting involved in politics, I heard for a long time around the conversation that was happening in Yuma, where they would pay you $50 for your blank ballot with your signature on the envelope. That's ballot harvesting. I'm thankful that we've seen cases happening in there so that we can address these issues. I'm thankful that the woman who voted on behalf of her deceased mother has been charged and pled guilty. I believe she pled guilty. We need to continue to address these issues. After the 2020 election, I took over 360 phone calls from voters that were expressing their concerns about the vote. I turned all of that information over to the Republican Party in the Attorney General's office. I heard from countless numbers of people who had concerns. One woman, her mother was in a nursing facility. She went to the nursing facility to get her mother to take her to vote. They get to the polling place and she was told that she had already voted and was unable to vote again. The daughter did not have any knowledge of the mother's vote. The mother didn't know that she had already voted. That's voter fraud. We need to address these issues and find the bad guys. There's always going to be bad apples in the group. So let's button down those policies. Let's fix the ballot adjudication. It should take longer than 3 seconds to verify that a signature matches. Let's provide voter ID or some form of ID and identifying features in the mail-in ballots if we are going to continue to have them. So if we can't get the votes to change it to a one-day paper ballot position, then let's modify it and get those reforms in place to ensure our elections are secure. I could go on for a very long time about this because I've spent hours researching, understanding our procedures. And the biggest thing is we have to ensure that we have Republicans in office who are going to uphold our vote, that are going to support the Electoral College, and those that supported the national popular vote should no longer be in office.
Okay, I hear from both of you some changes you'd like to make to how voting is done in Arizona. And you both raised some concerns about issues that you heard about in the 2020 election. I'd like to go back to Mr. Morris and tell me, who do you believe won the 2020 presidential election, and is it the same candidate who won in Arizona?
I do not believe that Biden won Arizona. I'm on the streets every day, and honestly, I haven't met a single person that would admit that they voted for Biden. But I attended several rallies that were around our president, President Trump, and that actually the amount of people that would show up and the support that would show up, I just cannot honestly believe that there was that much disparagement from what you see in real life on the streets and who you're meeting and who you're talking to what happened at the polls. Now, there's a number of questions, and if it wasn't a question, if it wasn't an issue, this would have been left in the cold almost 2 years ago, but it hasn't been. It's been repetitive. We've had bills like HB 2289 that has been brought to the floor. We've had several voter election and voter fraud bills that have been brought to the floor. We have ongoing investigations. We've had an audit, and everybody says, oh, well, this, that, and the other. The reality is that no one wants to admit 100% that there's a problem, because if you admit that 100% there's a problem, then you have to take on the role 100% of trying to fix it. And we do not have enough enforcement in place at this time, and that's going to change when we get into office, and to prosecute people who engage in voter fraud. It is fraud. Make no bones about it. When you commit fraud and you are engaging in fraud, you need to be prosecuted for that, and it needs to have a heavy penalty. But do I think that the president that was elected into office is the one that should be there? The absolute question is no.
Okay, Ms. Kelly, what do you think? Was Joe Biden the properly elected president, and did he win here in Arizona in 2020?
I don't believe he was the properly elected president, and I don't believe he won in Arizona. In the summer of last year, I traveled over 3,500 miles around the country, and not once did I see a Biden sign, but I saw hundreds of Trump signs. In that time, I saw 2 Biden stickers and thousands of Trump stickers. So to tell me that Biden won, I have a lot of questions and a lot of doubt on that. I believe that it's time to focus forward. We need to bring down the issues around our elections process. We need to tighten things up, increase the vote security, and restore hope into our election system.
So to go back to you, Mr. Morris, I mean, the two of you here tonight are far from the only ones who have expressed some doubt about the 2020 election, but still the Arizona Senate conducted a review of the election that found that Joe Biden won by, in fact, a slightly larger margin than the original count. The Attorney General has received lots of information that people submitted about the election, but hasn't indicated that he thinks there's evidence of widespread fraud that would change the election result. So why the disconnect there?
Well, we're going to find out not only in the primary, but in the general, what the voters think. And I will tell you right now that there is a establishment reason why somebody will not go out there and actually carry the torch to what's really happening. You have to either be all in or not in at all. And that's really what it comes down to. And when the voters go to the polls this year, they're going to know about those people that were in the Senate and in the House of Representatives that failed to stand for them, that failed to look at true securing of our elections in this state. And if those people get voted out, then I guess the voters will have spoken and the majority will have spoken. But we have to believe that people are smart enough to sift through all the stuff that's going on. I will tell you, there's never been a president in the history of the United States that had merchandise stands on almost every corner. I'm sorry, Hillary was pretty popular, but she was not as merchandise. She didn't have the merchandise out there that Trump had. And we're still, to this day, seeing a president that's no longer in office that's flying flags. People are still flying the flags of the 2020 election. There is something to be said for that. And it's not fanaticism. It's not because people are dumb or, you know, they're prejudiced or whatever. We're not fascist. We're American. And we want free and fair elections. And we need leaders in our houses, and we need leaders in our legislature that are going to represent who we are as people of this state. And I'll tell you right now that that's going to be occurring here in the next few weeks as we get into the the election process and the primaries and then in the general. And you will see a major change.
So I understand your point. Voters will have their say on this, and this is one of the subjects that folks are thinking about as they go to the polls. But specifically to the question of the evidence of issues in the 2020 election, the audit didn't suggest that Joe Biden wasn't the rightful winner. The Attorney General hasn't said he has that evidence. What makes you still believe that there were issues in 2020?
I've been down at the Capitol. I was down at the Capitol the day that the audit results were actually read. And here's the issue that I had. It was ironic that the news reported that the audit didn't find anything 35 minutes before the information was even provided to the Senate. There are a number of discrepancies that, when taken in individuals and taken in parts and then taken as a whole, show that there was voter fraud. But again, you have people that don't want to rock the boat, that are too scared to stand up because they're being told by someone else, don't get involved in this or don't get involved in that. They're not voting their conscience. They're not speaking because of who they are. They're allowing other people to dictate their positions. And there's a lot of fear in that house. I will tell you that when you watch some of these bills come up to the vote, people will either not show up or they will abstain for voting. Why do they do that? Because they're scared. They're scared of the fact that if they vote the way that they know needs to be voted, that it's going to have a counter effect on them. I'm not going into office to get reelected. I'm going into office to make a change. And if I stir a few pots, more power to me.
Okay, Ms. Kelly, what do you think? Are people too afraid to speak about what they know happened in 2020?
Well, for me, I've already received death threats. So fear for me, is somebody who has been the wife of a law enforcement officer that has served our community. I even had a 4x8 Trump sign in my front yard. The risk is real, but I know for me, I'm willing to stand up for what is right and do the right thing. Ultimately, that's what it comes down to. We need more people in office that are willing to do the right thing for the voters and for the citizens that they represent. They need to be engaged with the community. All too often, I think people are positioning themselves for the next position of power. I'm very disappointed in our Attorney General. I hope and pray that he's not holding on to cases of voter fraud that should have been prosecuted and dealt with. I also believe that this is where it's vital that we have conservative law enforcement officials that are willing to follow up on law violations such as voter fraud. When we bow down to power, we give in to our country. We give away our country, and it's not okay. We have to do better. I struggle with the idea that our community has 100% faith in our election system. But I think about some of the things that have happened over my lifetime, and I remember my grandparents being very frustrated about certain votes, very disappointed in certain elected officials. Another thing I'll tell you is that we need to eliminate career politicians. You should never be driven to only be an elected official in your life. And if you are, there is an issue there. So there's quite a few things that I think are a problem that we need to really address, and that's why I'm running.
Okay. All right. Well, I have just one more question for you both before we get to our closing statements. Hopefully this will be quick. Will you accept the results of the August 2nd primary election in which you're running?
Yes.
Mr. Moore, yes. Yes, Ms. Kelly. Mr. Morris?
Absolutely. That's very simple. We're very fortunate that the majority of the people that are running in our district have very similar views. There's not really a lot of us that have opposite views. I look forward to engaging in some actual discussion with some of the other candidates, but to be honest with you, we have a very similar belief in what's going on and what would better our district. And that's one thing that's very fortunate for our voters, is that I believe that we're going to have great leadership come out of this district, no matter what happens.
Okay. All right. And with that, we'll move on to our closing statements. And Mr. Morris, this is to you first. You've got a minute.
All right. Well, I appreciate you all tuning in this evening and allowing me the opportunity to kind of express who I am as a person. I'm not a career polished politician. I'm a kind of a rough guy, working class Joe that's been out there, but I believe that I bring something that would be a great change to what we've seen in our legislature in the past. I believe I bring the idea of both sides of the paycheck, and that I have some strong ability to stand and not be swayed by some of the people that are a little bit weaker to cave to some of the pressure that's there. I'm not looking to be elected to be reelected. I'm looking to be elected to make change. And when you go to the polls, you have to remember Brian Morris, because Morris is for us.
All right. Thank you. And Ms. Kelly, your closing statement.
Absolutely. As I mentioned when we started, I'm an Arizona native that has grassroots foundations in Glendale in the 85308 zip code. I'm a believer in working to make the grass greener where you are and not always chasing the greener grass. For me, I'm a constitutional conservative that's pro-life, pro-God, and pro-America. I support rebuilding our families, getting back to preserving our religious and other constitutional freedoms that we have. I know that as we move forward in the next few years of our life, our country is at a pivotal moment of either going to the radical left liberal policy or returning to our foundations of God and country. I'm a proud supporter of our military, law enforcement, and fire service. I'm a proud supporter of our Second Amendment and the right to defend and protect ourselves. And I will always fight to protect life from conception until natural death. I'm an advocate for America, and I am looking forward to having your vote, Jamie Kelly, for Arizona State Senate of Legislative District 27. You can learn more about me on my website at votejamiekelly.com, and I thank you for your time tonight.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Kelly. With that, we'll conclude our debate. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters, thanks to all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves before the August 2nd primary election. To everyone, thank you for putting up with my very hoarse voice for a few minutes there. As a reminder, the voter registration deadline is July 5th, which has already passed at the time of this debate, and early voting has already begun earlier today. All registered voters, including independent voters, can participate in the primary, and we encourage you to visit azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Thank you, and have a good evening.
Thank you.